Hello, and welcome to the first virtual information session for the 2025 Edmonton election, hosted by Edmonton Elections. Today, we're going to be talking about the launch of the 2025 Edmonton election campaign period. Oh, and welcome to the... Now, before we begin, I'd like to start with a land acknowledgement. So if we could just move to the next slide. Great. So I want to acknowledge that we are on the Métis homeland and Treaty 6 territory. We acknowledge the diverse Indigenous peoples whose ancestors' footsteps have marked this territory for centuries, such as Cree, Dene, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Nakota Sioux, as well as the Métis and Inuit, and now settlers from around the world. Through listening and learning, Edmonton Election is working to deliver an election for Indigenous peoples and settlers from around the world who continue to be welcomed here and who continue to call Edmonton home.
Thank you, Christy. I'm really happy to be here. So my name's Aileen Giesbrecht, and I'm the returning officer for Edmonton Elections. So here we are today. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking about the rules for the upcoming 2025 general election. But before we dive in, I just want to ensure everybody watching this presentation that this presentation is going to be recorded and we're going to be loading it onto the website just as soon as we can. There's also lots of other additional and great information. So I think we've got about 20 minutes to walk through some key election information. And so maybe over to you, Christy, so you can give us a highlight about what we're going to cover in the next, say, 20 minutes.
Great, thank you, Aileen. Yeah, we're going to talk about our agenda here. So for today, what we're going to do is we're going to have a brief introduction to Edmonton Elections. We're going to talk about the launch of the campaign period. We'll go over some key dates that are important to remember. We're also going to provide some time for questions. So we have asked for questions beforehand, but if you'd like to submit any questions now, please do by sending them to elections@edmonton.ca. And we'll get your questions today, but if not, we will be able to get to you in the next few days. And then we're also just going to leave you with how you can stay connected, especially as we approach Election Day and all of the significant dates. So Aileen, why don't we send it back to you, and you can start with an explanation of what is Edmonton Elections? Who are we?
Thank you, Christy. So happy to start off with just really explaining that the Edmonton Elections team is normally it's quite a small team, but it is growing in numbers, and we're located as part of the Office of the City Clerk here at the City of Edmonton. We are the non-partisan group that plans and runs the election. We run elections for 3 different organizations: the City of Edmonton, which sees the race for mayor and 12 councillors; the election of trustees for the Edmonton School District, and there are 9 trustees. And then there are 7 trustees for the Edmonton Catholic School District. So we've talked a little bit about Edmonton Elections, and we're that nonpartisan group that runs everything behind the scenes for the upcoming election. We want to talk about some of the recent changes in legislation. So if you've participated in elections before, don't assume that things have remained the same, because they haven't. So we are actually responsible for delivering all of the rules and all of the legislation related to all the operations before elections, on Election Day, and after Election Day. So there's 5 key changes that I want to highlight for you. So there is a longer campaign period, which actually starts today, as some of these new legislative changes do come into force and effect, and the campaign period runs until December of 2025. Another significant change is the inclusion of local political parties and slates of candidates for both Edmonton and Calgary for the municipal races. There has been an expansion of the special ballot eligibility. What that really means is talking about the mail-in ballot program, and we won't be talking about that in any detail today, but just to highlight that that was a significant change. There has also been the addition of a permanent electors register for local elections, and that's a voters list. And the last change is the prohibition in the use of tabulators to count paper ballots. So we will still obviously be counting the ballots, but we will be doing so by hand. And so there have been a lot more changes than the ones I just mentioned. And so if you're looking for more detail, I strongly suggest you have a look at the Local Authority Election Act, as well as the 2 recent regulations that were just released in the last 2 weeks. So that's some of the changes, and at the top of the list, I did talk about the campaign period. So the campaign period actually starts today. And the reason that we're doing this session is we want to spend a little bit of time explaining to everybody what that means for potential candidates, local political parties, as well as slates. So as of this morning, there are 2 new activities that are enabled. So candidates for Edmonton City Council, Edmonton School Division, and the Edmonton Catholic Separate School Division can submit their notice of intention to run, and we'll explain what that is in more detail. As well as local political parties and slates of candidates can submit their registration to participate in the 2025 Edmonton election. Once the notice of intent and registration is accepted, candidates and political parties can accept campaign contributions and can incur campaign expenses for the upcoming election. You'll notice I didn't say slates there because slates aren't able to actually incur expenses, but again, we'll talk about that more later in the presentation. So the notice of intention to run as a candidate is new, and on the next slide, I'm going to explain what's required to register. So the notice of intent must be submitted in writing, and it has to include 4 things. So the name and address and contact information of the candidate, the address of the place or places where the records of the candidate are going to be maintained, and how the address that we should be using for written communication, the names and address of the financial institutions to be used by the prospective candidate as depositories for campaign contributions made to that individual, and lastly, the names of the signing authorities for each of those depositories just mentioned. There is no form to fill out. It is as simple as sending an email with the information listed above to elections with an S at edmonton.ca. So if you look at our website, there is a simple checklist to help guide you, but again, there is no prescribed form to complete. You just need to send us an email. So once we receive your email or your official written notice, listed above, we will get in contact with you to confirm receipt, follow up if we need a bit more information, or to let you know that you've met all the requirements and you've been added to the public registry. If you want to know who's on that registry, just head to our website and we'll update it just as soon as we can. Once a candidate's notice of intention's been accepted, that's when candidates can begin collecting and expensing campaign contributions. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about this new thing called a local political party and a slate. So these are 2 other significant changes I mentioned a few moments ago. There are substantial differences between a slate of candidates and a local political party at the municipal level. So a local political party is defined as an organization that endorses candidates and supports their election, whereas a slate is a group of candidates whose entire purpose is to support the election of the slate members. A local political party is required to have a minimum of 5 candidates who, if elected, would comprise of at least 1/3 of city council, all running in different races across the municipality. That is a requirement in order to submit your registration package, where a slate must have 2 or more candidates. Political parties can begin receiving campaign contributions and incurring expenses beyond or in addition to what each individual candidate can receive. As I mentioned before, slates can't receive campaign contributions. They also cannot incur expenses. Campaign contributions can only be made to candidates, and shared slate expenses are divided equally amongst the members of the slate, who must comply with the candidate campaign limits. So that was a lot, so I'm going to hand it over to Christy, and she is going to walk us through the process for registering both local political parties and a slate.
Okay, so how do we get parties and slates registered? Let's start with slates. In order to register a slate, you need to provide full name and any abbreviation to be used on election documents, candidates' names, addresses, and signatures. The address for where records are maintained and communications may be addressed, and a statement by the candidate members of the slates that the slate's purpose is to support the election of the slate's candidates. So once registered, slates will be included in the registry, which is posted online at edmonton.ca/elections. For the local political parties, there is a similar process, but it's a little bit more involved. So first, Edmonton Elections, we have designed a registration form to help assist with the registration. This form is available at edmonton.ca/elections. You will hear that a lot, this presentation. So the form requires you to provide your full name and any abbreviation to be used on election documents, name of the party leader or principal officers, address or the places where records are maintained and where communications may be addressed, the name and address of the financial institution used for contributions, and the names of the signing authorities for the campaign account. Now, there's also going to be a second portion for this registration package, which means you must also include a statement of assets and the liabilities that is not dated earlier than 90 days of the application date, the names, addresses, and signatures of at least 1,000 party members who are eligible to vote in Edmonton and request the party's registration, a list of the endorsed candidates who have submitted their notice of intent and who, if elected, would make up more than 1/3 of council running in different seats across the municipality. So in Edmonton, that is a minimum of 5 candidates. You're also going to want to provide a statement by the leader or the principal officer of the party, and finally, the proof of the corporate registry search. Now, we know this is a big package you're going to be providing, so it could take up to 15 business days for us to review and go over. But don't be worried, applicants will have contact if they need contact with us to help work through the package and provide more information as needed. But once that package is considered complete, you also will be informed and be added to the register. Now I'm going to pass it back to Aileen to move on to the contribution and expense limits.
Thanks, Christy. So just starting with the contribution limit. So this slide summarizes the limits that contributions can be made to candidates, parties, and to slates. So municipal and school board candidates are each permitted to self-finance up to $10,000 per campaign period, not per year, but per campaign period. So again, for clarity, the campaign period starts today and it runs all the way till December 31st, 2025. Individuals are permitted to donate up to $5,000 per year to all the candidates in the municipality, $5,000 per year to all the candidates in each school division, and $5,000 per year to all of the political parties in both jurisdictions. Corporations, trade unions, and employee organizations can also contribute up to $5,000 per campaign period. Again, campaign periods start today and run till December next year, end of December. They can contribute $5,000 to all the candidates in the municipality, $5,000 per campaign period to all the candidates in the school division, and $5,000 per year to the registered parties both in Edmonton and in Calgary. So lots of information that's on this slide. Again, there is more detail and very helpful information in the regulation, which you can find on our website. So that is the contribution limits for all of the various types of campaigns you can support. Now, what are the expense limits? So we did just receive confirmation from the province of Alberta on the expense limits, and the expense limits for the upcoming election are based on the city's population as published by Municipal Affairs. The Municipal Affairs publication number is about 1 million people for next election. That's the number that's being used to calculate the expense limits. The slide shows the new expense limits for the upcoming election. And I'm not going to read through them all, but you'll notice that it only highlights the expense limits for candidates for mayor, candidates for councillor, as well as the local political parties. There are no expense limits for school board trustee elections, and as we've talked about before, all of this information is on our website, but the one point I want to mention just before we go on to the next slide and talk about the key dates is that slates, regarding a slate, expenses are to be split equally among all of the candidates. So again, lots of information on this slide, and there's more information on the website. So just want to spend a few minutes talking about some of the key dates, as today is the official start of the campaign period and we are less than a year away from Election Day, October 20th, 2025. There are some key dates and milestones that are fast approaching. So if we just jump to the next slide, I just want to make sure that everybody is aware of this. I have said many times that the election period starts today. The nomination period starts January 1st and that ends at noon on September 22nd. We will have a follow-up session to this to explain the nomination process. It is much more robust and involved in comparison to the intention to nominate yourself. We'll talk about that later, but if you want to be aware of when you can submit nomination papers, that starts January 1st and it concludes at noon on September 22nd. The other important date is related to local political parties and slates. The last day to register both of those entities is July 24th. So that's not the nomination date. It's the date that is the end of the opportunities to register local political parties or slates of candidates for the 2025 election. So that's July 24th. Again, the presentation is going to be on our website as well as a recording of this, this broadcast. So please do take some time to review the material.
Okay, great. Thank you, Aileen. So lots of information, lots more to come, but we wanted to take this time to open for some questions. As I said before, we had asked for pre-submitted questions, that we have some, but if you have some right now, please send them along to elections@edmonton.ca. Okay, so let's take a look. Okay, Aileen, so first of all, I have a question here about notice of intent. Can you please tell us the difference between notice of intent and nomination papers?
Sure. So the notice of intent is a new provision in the Local Authorities Election Act introduced for the next election in 2025. So as I mentioned before, the nomination, the intent to run process is really as simple as sending an email into Edmonton Elections with the information that we mentioned earlier in the presentation. And there's a checklist online that if you don't want to go back to the presentation, have a look at the checklist and then send in your intention. Once we get that information, we'll review it. If it's legislatively compliant, we'll quickly respond and we'll post your name. Once we post your name on the registry, that allows you to have stated publicly your intention to run, and you can incur campaign expenses as well as collect contributions. That notice of intent doesn't get your name on the ballot. There's a second process that you need to complete if you intend to run, and that is to complete your nomination papers. So the nomination papers, we will take those in early January 2025, and we will take those packages up until nomination day, which is September 22nd. It is a much more robust process. There will be forms and more information, but again, it's a two-step process. If you are wanting to have your name on the ballot next year, start with your notice of intention to run if you plan on incurring any expenses and you want to collect campaign contributions, and watch out to our website for more information on how to file your nomination papers. Two different processes, two different timelines. Hope that helps.
Yeah, good clarity there. Let's move on to a question about political parties. So, how do political parties submit signatures? Is there a form?
Great question. So again, mentioning this is really new for local elections in both Edmonton and Calgary, and there is a very robust process for registering a new political party. So parties have to submit the names, addresses, and signatures of at least 1,000 eligible electors who have to be not only eligible to vote, but they also have to be members of the party. And the question, I think, was, is there a form? Well, we have created a form to make this easy, as well as additional forms to facilitate and help you complete your registration package. So if you can go to edmonton.ca/elections, all of the requirements are there. But yes, there is a form that you can use to get at least your 1,000 signatures from eligible voters who are also members of the party.
Okay, so sticking with this sort of process, I have a question here about if can local political parties and slates fill out their registration package online?
Great question. Elections are very paper-based, and so the short answer is no, but let me explain a little bit more. So the only part of this process that we've talked about today that it can be simply done through an email is the notice of intent to run. Political parties or slates need to fill out a registration package, and the reason it can't be submitted online is that we require a significant amount of information. And so in addition to looking at our website and downloading the forms and looking at our how-to guides, the other thing we are strongly encouraging people to do is to reach out once you know that you're just about ready to submit your package. We want you to reach out to us at elections@edmonton.ca, and we're going to schedule an appointment time for one of our members of our elections team to be able to meet up with you to receive that package. We are then, as Christy, you mentioned, we're going to take some time to review it to make sure it's legislatively compliant. If there's any missing information or clarification needed, our team's going to reach out to you just as soon as they can, and we're going to do our very best to make sure that all the reviews and verifications are done within 15 business days.
Great, yep. So understood that it is a bit of a process, but we will be there. Okay, continuing on with political parties here, Can political parties be affiliated with provincial or federal political parties?
Fair question, absolutely. The short answer is no, but let me just expand that a little bit more. So local political parties have to be under legislation, have to be separate and distinct from both the federal and provincial parties. This is a requirement that is outlined in the Local Authorities Election Act. The local political parties are also not allowed to receive campaign contributions for from any federal or provincial political party. So that's a hard no on that one.
Okay. Thank you for that, Aileen. Okay, why don't we take one more question? I have one more here about what is the difference between a slate of candidates and local political party? Is there a benefit from choosing one over the other?
So I would say if you're considering participating in the upcoming election, either in supporting a campaign or running for office, I really strongly suggest that you look at the website and you spend a lot of time reading through the legislation. It's not Edmonton Elections' place to give advice as to how one should associate either with a political party or with a slate, but it'd be good for me just to go over the fundamental differences again. So being part of setting up a local political party, it is an organization, and the entire purpose of that organization is to participate in endorsing and supporting multiple candidates that if they win, that party would comprise of at least 1/3 of the candidates at City Council. Whereas a slate of candidates does have a simpler registration process than political parties, but they are not permitted to receive campaign contributions. Slates only exist for the duration of the election, whereas political parties are permitted to operate over multiple election cycles. So they're not at all the same thing, and maybe because we've grouped them on the same slide, they might seem somewhat similar. They're both new, but their purpose is very different, and anybody considering to run should inform themselves.
Great. Okay, thank you for that, Aileen. So lots of really good information here today. I think we just wanted to leave you with ways to stay connected. You can follow on X at Edmonton Elections. You can always regularly check the website edmonton.ca/elections. And of course, please continue to email any questions that you might have to elections@edmonton.ca. So thank you everyone for viewing today, and thank you Aileen for all the answers and information, and for what we'll be having in the coming months leading up to the election. It's an exciting time.
Thank you.